Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Insights. Today's journey takes us into the story of Boeing, the company that helped shape the history of flight. For more than a century, Boeing has faced big risk, celebrated great successes, and overcome serious challenges. From simple wooden planes to modern jetliners, and even spacecraft, this company has transformed the way the world travels. Fasten your seatbelt, sit back, and get ready, because this is the story of how one man's dream took off and became a global giant. Part 1. The Beginning, 1916 to 1930s. The story of Boeing starts with a man named William E. Boeing. He was born in Detroit, Michigan, in 1881. As a young man, he was very interested in the new world of flight. He was a wealthy person, and he liked to build and to fly planes. In 1916, he and a friend started a company in Seattle, Washington. At first, the company was called the Pacific Aero Products Company. A year later, it was changed to the Boeing Airplane Company. The company's first plane was a small seaplane, a plane that could land on water. It was called the Boeing Model 1. At first, the company was very small. They built planes for the U.S. military during World War I. But after the war, the military did not need as many planes. So, Boeing had to find new ways to make money. The company started to build planes to carry mail. This was a very important job. In those days, there were no mail planes. Mail was carried by trains or boats, but a plane could get mail from one city to another much faster. Boeing built a very good mail plane called the Model 40. This plane was very successful and helped the company grow. The 1920s and 1930s were a time of great growth for Boeing. The company was in a good place in Seattle, a city with a lot of wood and a good port. Boeing built bigger and better planes for the military and for mail. They also started to make a new kind of plane to carry people. These planes were much bigger and more comfortable than the old ones. They were called flying boats, like the Boeing Model 314 Clipper. This was a very famous plane. It flew across the Atlantic Ocean, and it was a very luxurious way to travel. It had a dining room and sleeping rooms. This plane showed that planes could be used for long-distance travel and not just for short trips. Boeing was also a very smart company. It did not just build planes. It also had an airline and an airplane parts company. But in 1934, the U.S. government passed a new law. The law said that one company could not build planes and also own an airline. So, Boeing had to sell its airline business. This was a big change, but it helped the company to focus on what it did best, building airplanes. By the end of the 1930s, Boeing was a well-known company, but it was not yet a giant. The next big thing that would make Boeing a giant was a war. The company was about to face its biggest challenge and its biggest opportunity. Part 2. The War Years, 1930s to 1945. The biggest time of change for the Boeing Company was during World War II. Before the war, Boeing was a company that built planes for a few customers. After the war, it was a company that could build planes faster than any other company in the world. This happened because of two very important planes, the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-29 Super Fortress. The B-17 was a bomber plane. It was a big plane with 4 engines, and it was designed to fly a long way and carry a lot of bombs. It was called a flying fortress because it had many guns to protect itself from enemy planes. When the war started, the U.S. military needed many of these planes. The B-17 was a key part of the U.S. Air Force. At first, Boeing built the planes by hand, but the military needed many, many planes. So Boeing had to find a new way to build them. The company learned how to build planes on a production line, like a car factory. This was a very new idea for planes. The planes were built very quickly. At one point, a new B-17 was finished every 2 hours. After the B-17, Boeing built an even bigger and better plane, the B-29 Super Fortress. This was a more advanced plane. It could fly higher and farther than the B-17. It was so advanced that many people had to work on it. It had a special system to control the guns from inside the plane, and it had a special cabin for the pilots that was pressurized, which meant the air inside was the same as on the ground even when the plane was flying very high. The B-29 was used in the war against Japan. It was the plane which carried the atomic bombs that ended the war. The war changed everything for Boeing. The company grew from a few thousand workers to over 50,000 workers. They built huge factories that could make planes very quickly. This experience was very important. After the war, the military did not need as many planes. The company had to change. They had all these big factories and all these smart engineers. What could they do now? They could not go back to building small planes. The war had taught them how to build big planes quickly and efficiently. The lessons they learned during the war would help them to build a new kind of plane for a new kind of world. The world was about to enter the jet age, and Boeing was ready to lead the way. Part 3. The jet age begins, 1945 to 1960s. After World War II, the world of aviation changed completely. The piston engines of the old planes were replaced by jet engines. Jet engines were much faster and more powerful. Boeing was one of the first companies to see the future in jet travel. At first, they used their knowledge to build new bombers for the military, like the famous B-52 Stratofortress. The B-52 was a very big jet bomber that could fly a very long way. It was a very successful plane and is still used by the military today. But Boeing had a bigger idea. They wanted to build a jet plane for passengers, for regular people. This was a very big risk. No one had ever built a passenger jet before. The company's leaders thought that people would want to travel much faster. So, in 1954, Boeing decided to build a prototype jet, a test plane. It was called the Dash 80. They spent a lot of their own money on this project. This was a very big risk. If the project failed, the company could go out of business. But the project was a great success. The Dash 80 became the famous Boeing 707. The 707 was the first successful commercial jet airliner. It was a beautiful plane that looked like a long tube with wings. It was much faster than the old propeller planes. It could fly across the United States in just a few hours. Before the 707, it took a whole day to fly across the country. The 707 made flying fast and comfortable. It made the world feel much smaller. Many airlines wanted to buy the new plane. They knew that people would want to fly on a fast jet. The 707 was a huge success. It made Boeing the leader in commercial aviation. The success of the 707 was not just about the plane. It was also about Boeing's approach. Boeing was a very customer-focused company. They listened to the airlines and built the plane that the airlines wanted. They made a plane that was reliable and easy to fly. This focus on the customer helped Boeing to stay on top. The 707 was the first of many famous planes from Boeing. It opened the door to a new world of jet travel, and it set the stage for the next big thing in aviation. Part 4: The Jumbo Jet and the Space Race, 1960s to 1970s. After the success of the 707, Boeing had a new idea. They thought that in the future, more and more people would want to fly. So they decided to build a much, much bigger airplane. This plane was so big that it was called a jumbo jet. This plane was the famous Boeing 747. The 747 was so big that it was like two planes in one. It had 2 floors in the front, and it could carry hundreds of passengers. It was designed to be able to carry a lot of people for a much cheaper price per person. This was a very new idea and a big risk. Boeing even had to invent new ways to build this giant plane. It required completely new machines and tools, and the company had to create a new, huge factory in Everett, Washington, that was so big the clouds could form inside it. This massive effort was a true gamble on the future of air travel. The creation of the 747 was a very big challenge. The company spent a huge amount of money and time on it. Boeing called this plane the Queen of the Skies. And it truly was. When it first flew, people were amazed by its size and its power. It made long-distance international travel much cheaper. Before the 747, a trip from America to Asia was very expensive. The 747 made it possible for many more people to travel around the world. It was a huge commercial success and became a symbol of global travel. At one time, nearly all international flights used a 747. At the same time, Boeing was a key part of the U.S. space program. In the 1960s, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were in a space race. The U.S. wanted to be the first country to put a person on the moon. Boeing was a very important part of this effort. The company built the first stage of the Saturn V rocket, the rocket that carried the Apollo astronauts to the moon. The Saturn V was a very powerful rocket. It was the most powerful machine that humans had ever built. The work on the Saturn V showed that Boeing was not just a great airplane company, it was a great aerospace company. It could build things that could fly both in the sky and in space. The 1970s were a difficult time for Boeing, even with the success of the 747. The economy was not very good, and people were not traveling as much. The company had to lay off many workers. There was a famous billboard in Seattle that said, "Will the last person to leave Seattle please turn out the lights?" But the company survived. It survived because it was a leader in both commercial aviation and military and space technology. It was a company that was always looking for the next big idea. Part 5. Challenges and mergers, 1980s to 2000s. In the 1980s and 1990s, the world of aviation became more competitive. Boeing was no longer the only company building big jetliners. A new company in Europe, called Airbus, started to build its own planes. Airbus was a big challenge for Boeing. It was not a single company, but a partnership of different European countries. This gave Airbus a lot of support from their governments. Boeing had to work very hard to stay a leader in this new global marketplace. The competition was very difficult. To stay on top, Boeing built new and better airplanes. They built the 757 and the 767, which were very good planes for mid-range flights. But their biggest new plane was the 777. The 777 was a completely new kind of plane. It was very modern and very efficient. It was the first commercial airplane to be designed completely with a computer. There were no paper drawings. This made the plane very strong and very well designed. The 777 was a huge success. It was a big sign that Boeing was still a leader and could build a very good plane, even with a lot of competition. In the 1990s, Boeing also went through a very big change. The company decided to get bigger by buying other companies. In 1997, Boeing bought a company called McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas was also a very famous company that built planes for both the military and for commercial airlines. By buying McDonnell Douglas, Boeing became much, much bigger. It became the largest aerospace company in the world. It also bought a company called Rockwell International, which was a very important company in the space program. These mergers made Boeing a huge company that built airplanes, rockets, and military jets. These mergers made the company very big, but they also changed the company's culture. Before, Boeing was a company that was run by engineers. The most important thing was to build a very good and safe plane. But after the mergers, the company was also run by people who were focused on money and business. The goal was not just to build a good plane, but to make a lot of money for the shareholders. The company leaders started to look at costs more than quality. This change would be a big problem for the company in the future. The company would have to face some of its biggest challenges yet. Part 6. Modern Era and Recent Issues. 2000s to present. In the 2000s, Boeing continued to build new planes. Their most important new plane was the 787 Dreamliner. The Dreamliner was a very special plane. It was made mostly of carbon fiber, a very strong and light material. Because it was so light, it used much less fuel than other planes. It was also designed to be very comfortable for passengers. The windows were very big, and the air inside was more comfortable. The Dreamliner was a very important plane for Boeing. It showed that the company was still a leader in new technology. It was a big success, and many airlines bought it. However, the modern era has also been a very difficult time for Boeing. The company's biggest problems came with its new version of a famous plane, the 737 MAX. The 737 is a very famous and popular plane. It has been used for many years. Boeing decided to make a new version, the 737 MAX. The new plane had a new, bigger engine, which was more fuel efficient. But to make the engine fit on the plane, the company had to create a new computer system to help the pilots fly it. This system was called MCAS in the years 2018 and 2019. Two 737 MAX planes crashed. The first one was in Indonesia, and the second one was in Ethiopia. The crashes were a terrible tragedy. Many people died. The investigation showed that the MCAS computer system on the planes was the main problem. The system was causing the planes to nose down, and the pilots could not fix it. The company had to stop flying all the 737 MAX planes in the world. This was a huge problem for Boeing. It showed that the company was not focused enough on safety. The government and the public were very angry. Today, Boeing is working very hard to fix the problems with the 737 MAX and to regain people's trust. The company has changed its leaders and is working to make safety its #1 priority again. The story of Boeing is a long one, filled with great achievements and big mistakes. The company built planes that connected the world, helped win a war, and even carried people to the moon. But recent problems show an important truth. Even a company with a great past must always stay focused on safety and quality. The future of Boeing depends on this.